Have you ever been made to feel like an embarrassment to your own family? Not because of anything you did wrong, but simply because of who you were? I have. And for a long time I believed them. My name is Tatum. I'm 32 years old, I live in Mississauga, and I work as a pediatric occupational therapist at a children's rehabilitation center just outside Toronto. I've spent the last 8 years helping kids relearn how to button their shirts, hold a pencil, climb stairs. The small, quiet things most people take for granted. It's not glamorous work. It doesn't come with a corner office or a title that sounds impressive at dinner parties. But I love it in a way I can't fully explain to someone who hasn't watched a 5-year-old finally tie their own shoes for the first time and burst into tears of pure joy. My family, though, my mother's side especially, never quite understood that. To them, success had a very specific shape. It looked like my older sister, Pauline, who married a commercial real estate developer named Brent when she was 26, and moved into a house in Oakville with a double garage and a kitchen island big enough to land a small plane on. It looked like my brother-in-law's Friday golf games and my sister's charity luncheons, and the way they casually mentioned things like the cottage and the firm's annual gala, as if these were ordinary Tuesday conversations. My family gathered around that version of success like it was a campfire, and everyone who didn't fit that shape was left standing a little ways off in the cold. I was always a little ways off in the cold. Part of it was the divorce. I had been married, briefly, painfully, in my late 20s to a man who turned out to be someone very different than I thought I was marrying. When it ended, I moved back to the GTA, started over, and eventually made peace with the fact that I was building a life on my own terms. I had my apartment. I had my job. I had my best friend Winifred, who I've known since middle school, and who has talked me off more ledges than I can count. I had my daughter, Nell, 5 years old, obsessed with dinosaurs and macaroni art, the most important person in my life by such a wide margin it's almost funny. What I didn't have was my family's approval. My mother never said it outright, but she had a way of making her feelings known through the particular silence that followed whenever I mentioned my work, or through the too long pause before she asked whether I was seeing anyone, or through the way she'd refer to Pauline's house as the kind of place where Nell could really have room to grow, as if my 2-bedroom apartment in Mississauga was somehow failing my daughter. As if my father was quieter about it, but he followed my mother's lead in most things. He always had. So when the invitation arrived for his 65th birthday party, a formal dinner at a private event room at a boutique hotel in downtown Toronto, I was surprised to be included at all. The card was cream-colored and embossed. It said black tie, it said 6 o'clock. It said please RSVP by the 15th. I ran my thumb over the raised lettering and felt something cautiously hopeful rise in my chest. Maybe things were shifting. Maybe this was the start of something different. Then my mother called. It was a Tuesday evening, just after I'd put Nell to bed. I was standing in my kitchen eating leftover pasta when my phone lit up with her name. "Did you get the invitation?" she asked. "I did," I said. "I'm planning to come." There was that pause. That specific pause I'd spent my whole life learning to brace for. "Tatum," she said, "I need you to think carefully about this." I set down my fork. "Brent's business partner is going to be there," she continued, "the one I've told you about. He's brought his wife, and they're the kind of people who know everyone. Do you understand? And some of your father's colleagues from the chamber are coming, people he's worked with for years who don't really know our family situation." "Our family situation," I repeated. "I just mean, it might be awkward, with Nell and everything." "You'd have to bring her, wouldn't you? Because you don't have anyone to watch her on a Saturday night, and a black tie dinner is not the place for a 5-year-old, and are you uninviting me to Dad's birthday party?" She didn't answer right away, which was an answer in itself. "I'm not uninviting you," she said carefully. "I'm just suggesting that maybe this isn't the right event for your situation. Your father would understand. We can celebrate with you separately, just the family. I am family. Tatum. I'm his daughter. I'm family. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." she said, and there was a tiredness in her voice that I recognized, the particular exhaustion of someone who has decided they're the reasonable one in a conversation and can't understand why the other person keeps refusing to agree. It's one evening. Your father would be embarrassed. You know how he gets when things don't go smoothly in front of people who matter. I don't remember saying goodbye. I think I just hung up. I stood in my kitchen for a long time afterward, looking at the pasta going cold on the counter, and I thought about all the years I had spent trying to make myself smaller so that my existence would stop being inconvenient for my family. I thought about Nell asleep in her room with the dinosaur nightlight. I thought about the invitation still sitting on my kitchen table, cream-colored and embossed, with my name on it. My name, on the invitation. For my own father's 65th birthday. I went and picked it up and put it on the fridge with a magnet. I didn't call my mother back. I didn't call my sister, who I knew had almost certainly been part of this conversation. I went to bed and I lay there for a while in the dark thinking, and then I made a decision that felt less like bravery and more like finally being too tired to do anything else. I was going. Finding a dress was a project. I didn't own anything formal. My work wardrobe runs toward washable layers and sensible shoes, which is what you wear when small children are regularly wiping their hands on you. So on the Thursday before the party, I took Nell to a consignment shop on Dundas Street and spent 2 hours trying things on, while she sat on a little velvet footstool and offered extremely confident opinions. That one's boring, she said about a navy sheath dress. That one's too sparkly, she said about a sequined number that probably agreed with her. That one, she said with great authority, about a deep burgundy dress with a simple silhouette and a draped neckline that I would not have picked for myself in 100 years. She was absolutely right. I bought it. I called my friend Winifred that night and told her everything. You're going, she said immediately. Not as a question, I'm going. Good. Wear the burgundy. Do your hair up. Walk in like you own the floor. Win. I'm going to be so nervous. You have spent 8 years helping children recover from brain injuries and developmental challenges without losing your patience or your gentleness for a single day, she said. You can handle 2 hours in a hotel ballroom with your mother. I laughed, but my hands were shaking a little while I was on the phone. I arranged for Winifred to pick up Nell and keep her for the night. Her kids are a bit older, and Nell thinks their house is the most exciting place on earth because they have a trampoline. And on Saturday I did my hair and put on the burgundy dress and drove downtown and sat in my car in the hotel parking garage for about 4 minutes before I made myself get out. The event room was on the 2nd floor. I could hear the noise before the elevator doors opened, the particular sound of a formal party in full swing, glasses and conversation, and a jazz quartet doing something tasteful in the corner. I smoothed my dress and walked in. My sister saw me first. Pauline's face went through several things in quick succession. Surprise, displeasure, the controlled composure she'd been trained in since childhood. She crossed the room toward me with a champagne flute in one hand and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Tatum, she said, quiet and tight. Mom said you weren't coming. Mom was mistaken, I said pleasantly. You can't just. She glanced around, checking who was watching. This isn't the place to make a point. I'm not making a point, I said. I'm here for Dad's birthday. Is he around? Tatum. But I'd already spotted my father near the far end of the room, standing with a small group of people in dark suits. He looked older than I expected, somehow. 65. His hair was fully silver now. I had a sudden unexpected wave of something. Not anger, just grief, for all the time that keeps passing whether you want it to or not. My mother appeared at my shoulder like she'd been summoned. Tatum. Her voice was controlled but her jaw was set. We talked about this. We did, I agreed. I disagreed. Excuse me. I moved through the room. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't awful, it was. I could feel the awareness of people registering me or registering the tension between me and my mother, the slight wrongness in the air the way you feel a change in weather. I kept my spine straight and my expression neutral and made my way toward my father. He turned when I was a few feet away. Tatum, he said, and something in his face shifted. Something complicated and hard to read. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said. "I'm sorry I almost didn't make it." He looked at me for a moment, and then he looked past me toward where I knew my mother was standing, and I saw the familiar calculation happen in his eyes. The reflex to manage, to smooth, to not disrupt the evening. I've seen it my whole life. But before he could say anything, the man standing next to him turned slightly, and I recognized him. His name was Mr. Alderton. I knew him by reputation, not personally. He was the Regional Director of Children's Health, Ontario, the provincial body that oversees pediatric health services, funding across the GT and beyond. My rehabilitation center was one of 37 programs under the umbrella of organizations his office had been reviewing for the past 2 years as part of a major restructuring initiative. I had spent the better part of 18 months preparing our center's case for continued funding, had written reports and attended consultations and sat across from his office's representatives more times than I could count. I hadn't known he'd be here. I hadn't known he knew my father. Mr. Alderton looked at me, and then his expression changed and he said, in a voice that carried, "Is this your daughter?" My father said, "Yes, this is Tatum." And Mr. Alderton extended his hand to me and said, "Tatum, of course. Your team's submission last spring, the longitudinal outcomes report, that was some of the most thorough work our office received. I told our policy lead it should be the template for how these centers present their cases." I shook his hand. My voice, when I found it, was steady. "Thank you. That report was a team effort, but I'm glad it was useful." "Useful," he said with a slight smile. "That's understating it. We're actually using your center's model in the funding criteria revisions we're finalizing now." He looked at my father, who had gone very still. "You didn't tell me your daughter ran the OT program at Lakeview Rehab." My father started. "I don't run it," I said. "I'm a senior therapist." "But we have a good team, a remarkable team," Mr. Alderton said. "We've had families contact our office specifically to say that the services at that center changed their child's trajectory. That kind of feedback doesn't come in often, I can tell you that." My mother had materialized somewhere to my left. I didn't look at her. My father was quiet for a moment, and then he said something I hadn't expected. He said quietly, "I didn't know that, Tatum." And I looked at him, really looked at him, and I thought, "I know you didn't. Because you never asked." But what I said was, "I know, Dad." The party continued around us. Mr. Alderton moved on to speak with someone else, with a friendly nod in my direction that I suspected cost my mother a great deal to witness. My father stayed where he was. We stood together for a moment in a silence that felt different from the usual kind, less like exclusion and more like something slowly, awkwardly, beginning to shift. Pauline drifted over at some point. She had a look on her face that I recognized from childhood. The one she got when something hadn't gone the way she'd planned and she was recalibrating. "I didn't know you worked with Children's Health Ontario," she said as if this were casual conversation. "You never asked," I said, equally pleasantly. She didn't have a response for that. I stayed for the full dinner. I ate the salmon, which was good, and drank 1 glass of white wine, and made conversation with a couple of my father's colleagues, who were perfectly friendly and entirely uninterested in whatever family drama was quietly radiating from the far end of the table. I watched my father give a short toast, and I clapped along with everyone else. I thought about Nell at Winifred's house, probably convinced by now to stay up past her bedtime watching something with the older kids. Near the end of the evening, my father found me near the dessert table. He looked like he wanted to say something and didn't know how to start. That expression, I've seen it before. He's never been as easy talker. Neither have I, honestly. "Your work," he said finally. "With the kids. Is it? Do you like it?" It was such a simple question, such a small question, spent 32 years waiting for it, and I hadn't known that until this moment. "I love it," I said. "I really love it." He nodded slowly. "You should have told us more about it." I wanted to say, "I tried." I wanted to say, "You never listened." I wanted to say a lot of things that would have been true and would have ruined whatever this small, fragile moment was. Instead, I said, "I'll do that. Starting now." He nodded again. He looked old and uncertain and a little lost, and I felt angry at him still, genuinely, and also sad for him, and also something I didn't quite have a name for. Something that might have been the very beginning of something like forgiveness, still too small and new to say out loud. My mother did not speak to me for the rest of the evening. I saw her watching from across the room with the look she uses when she's decided to be dignified about something, which in our family means silent and cold. I understood that things would not be resolved by morning. I understood that there would be more conversations, difficult ones, and that not all of them would go well. But I also understood something I hadn't quite believed before. I was not the problem. I had never been the problem. I was a pediatric occupational therapist who had spent 8 years doing work that mattered, who was raising a child on her own with joy and consistency, and an admittedly alarming number of dinosaur books, who had written funding reports that were apparently being used as policy models by provincial health offices, and my family had spent years trying to make me feel like a liability. I drove home that night through downtown Toronto and over the bridge and down the long stretch of road toward my neighborhood, and the street lights made everything orange and familiar, and I thought about calling Winifred to debrief, but I was too tired and too full of feelings to talk. I thought I'd just drive for a bit. My phone buzzed at a red light. I didn't check it until I got home. It was from my father. A text. He almost never texts. It said, "I'm glad you came tonight." I sat in my car in my parking spot in my apartment building's underground garage, and I read it 3 times. "I'm glad you came tonight." I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to shrink myself to fit into a space my family had decided was the right shape for me. I thought about the invitation on my fridge. I thought about Nell asleep somewhere across town with a dinosaur nightlight blazing, full of confidence about who she was and what she liked and what she deserved. I was going to raise her to never wonder. I texted my father back. I said, "Me too, Dad." Then I went upstairs, changed out of the burgundy dress, hung it carefully on the back of my closet door, and made myself a cup of tea. And for the first time in a long time, in the quiet of my own apartment in my own life that I had built by myself, I felt like I wasn't standing in the cold anymore.